to call the Drainage Board for September to order, and would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as mailed?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on it? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Roll call. Sorry, should have did that first.
Hugh Glasgow.
Here.
Tony Hendricks.
Here.
Sarah Hefner. Here. Rich Mrozinski is absent. John Coulter.
Here.
Steve Mrozinski.
Here.
Mike Pullen.
Here.
Brad Adamski.
Here.
On the Cook Ditch. Starts on that.
We discussed in motion to accept Aquatic Control's bid for treatment, and I've been in talks with the local property owners in Dewey Township, and we are actually going to start the treatment tomorrow around 9 o'clock. 2 different types of treatment for 2 different types of below the water weeds and bank weeds. So that's going to start tomorrow. Everybody is in favor of it. They aren't pumping out of that ditch at all. So
tell me where it is.
We gave them the go-ahead to get started because nobody's irrigating. So that's going to start tomorrow and hopefully relieve a lot of their problems.
Sounds great. How long until we'll actually see how that turns out? I mean, did he tell you within weeks?
I think from talking to people that have had it done before, you can see results within, I'd say, a couple weeks, or I don't think you have to wait very long.
Who's doing the work?
Aquatic Control out of Valparaiso.
So we're hoping that you can give us a neat report next meeting.
I will be able to report on it
out.
next meeting. I'm sure we'll see something really cool before then. So, but yeah, if you're down there, stop on by. He's going to start at 2400 South and go up to Highway 8 tomorrow. So it'll probably be an all-day thing.
Up to what? State Road 8. Okay.
After starting to think of that, are you thinking of other places we might need to have this done?
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. If we need to do that in other places, we'll definitely have that as an option.
Mr. Dembski, your reports, please.
I imagine I'm not getting off easy today. So this will be the bulk of the meeting, probably. Obviously, we just finished the workshop on the Schurz Ditch. There was a lot of legal talk that came out of last meeting, and I think just updating the board, in addition to what we just learned at the workshop, and giving you some background of the legal procedure. And I know Commissioner Mrozinski, who's not here today, had some questions about the process of an injunction. So I think this is a good opportunity to just talk about that, both in the specifics of this case, but in general, what the board has the right to do in similar situations or in future events. So at our last meeting, after hearing discussion on the Schurz Ditch, a motion was made to issue an injunction against the city to stop them from continuing on with the dewatering that was pumping water into the Schurz Ditch. One of the concerns that was brought up with that was the potential for pollution. The other, of course, was the additional water that the ditch already can't handle the water that it's receiving, so let alone any additional water. There's a statute in place that very clearly says the town or a city, a municipality, if they're going to be doing any construction that will directly or indirectly affect a county-regulated ditch, they need to come to the board first. They need to make a written request for their project that allows the county surveyor's office to go out and assess whether the ditch can take that additional water or what impact it's going to have. Also, potentially to assess damages that may happen to private property owners as part of that additional intake of water. Then what the town or the municipality is supposed to do is enter into a written commitment to improve the drainage so that it can handle that additional flow. That's the statute that's in place. That's the statute we would have been directed to sue on, basically for the injunctive relief. I know Mike went out Tuesday night after that meeting. They started the testing to make sure that there were no contaminants that were being pumped and dumped onto the land flowing into the county regulated ditch. The next morning I contacted the city attorney just as a courtesy and as a heads up and said, this is coming your way. And by the way, Nick Minnick, who was at our meeting, said this could be done within a couple of days. Can you confirm the timeline of the contractor and how long this dewatering is going to be going? By that afternoon, or even by that late morning, I was contacted by the county attorney, who had talked to Commissioner Mrzinski and clarified that it was not a lawsuit against the city that was being sought, but rather just a stop work order. So at that point, the county attorney stepped in. Shaw wrote a letter or an email to the city directing them to stop the pumping and to stop the dewatering process. So at that point, that's how it was being addressed. I'm not going to get any further into what Shaw and Commissioner Mrzinski discussed. They're not here, but that's the way it was presented to me, was that rather than injunction, it was a stop work, which is a form of injunction. So we held off on filing any lawsuit. Carry forward into the next week, the dewatering was still going on. By that point, we had a meeting scheduled with Mr. Spear, with Nick Minnick, with the city attorney, and Commissioner Mrzinski and myself on Friday afternoon. At that point, we got commitments from the city that they were going to work overtime that weekend. They would have their contractor done, and by Monday morning, there would be no more dewatering that would be going into the Schurz ditch. There was rain that weekend, so ultimately it went on Monday and then stopped Tuesday morning. So at that point, and by then, of course, we had results back from the potential contaminant testing showing that there was, at least in the testing we were given, or confident from the county's perspective, that there was no contamination being pumped into the regulated ditch. The city's commitment from that point was, now that the basin was completed, that's where any dewatering or that's where any pumping would go, into the basin. It would no longer be draining into the Schurz ditch. You heard comments about that. There were other comments from other property owners. I think there's some inconsistencies that I have concerns with that the city's telling us that maybe the property owners weren't made aware of when they should have been made aware of. Those are certainly concerns, and I think the board has those concerns. But as far as their representation of what water is being now directed towards the Schurz ditch, that has stopped. And I think I would rely on Tony's office to give an opinion for the county on that, whether that's indeed the case. If that is the case, then the motion or the idea of having an injunction at this point is moot, at least as far as whether any water is being pumped into the Schurz ditch. I can't tell you, I'm not an expert in those areas to tell you whether water is going into the Schurz ditch or not. What I can tell you from the legal side is, if we do go forward, or if we had gone forward or choose to go forward in the future with an injunction, these are the standards I have to meet in front of a judge in filing that. And I'm working off the draft of the complaint that I'd started per your direction. Okay, first we have to say that a temporary restraining order is entirely appropriate in the circumstances and will not cause harm to any of the parties. We can't necessarily say that against the city, because if we stop their project, there's financial issues at play there. Plus, you've heard the evidence today, or at least the representation today, that this project benefits not just the city, but ultimately the county as well, through the effect on the Travis ditch. So stopping or delaying that project, there could potentially be harm involved there. We have to say that the plaintiff has no adequate remedy at law, as there is no measure of damages sufficient to compensate the plaintiff for defendant's defiant actions. I think as a board we could say that, because we can say they violated a statute. They were to come before the board and ask permission before they went forward. Now, part of that asking of permission is, again, Tony's office determining that the Schurz ditch, or whatever ditch we're dealing with at that time, can't handle the additional water that's being directly or indirectly moved towards it. The potential harm to the plaintiff if the injunction is not granted outweighs the potential harm to the defendant if the injunction is granted. That's where we get into trouble. If we have the city telling us that this will be done in a day or 2 days or even a week, what is the potential harm to us versus stopping the project altogether and creating a mess of a long-term problem, a long-term project that they're trying to alleviate? Which gets us back to the other, is there an adequate remedy of law for the plaintiffs in this case? And I don't just mean the drainage board, I mean the individual property owners. An adequate remedy of law could be money damages. And if you've got a farmer whose land is flooded there's money damages involved there. That doesn't necessarily mean an injunction is guaranteed. They can get compensated. They could go outright and say that that's an improper taking of their land and get compensated entirely for the value of their property. We've got two property owners in this particular case. We've got one that wants some water, one that wants no water. Both of them, whether you want to argue whether Louis got standing to talk on behalf of his family or not, I mean, the Spears family farm, regardless, has some water issues on their property. The conservation, you heard statements there that maybe they weren't informed by the city as the city had told us they were, and that there was construction even on their property without their notification. So you got potential damages, you got potential trespass damages. Those are private cause of actions. Those aren't necessarily for you to address, other than one section of the statute, which I'll get to as I close this out. The other issue, as far as an injunction, and this is something the board's got to be aware of, again, in these circumstances, but any future injunction request, is that pursuant to Indiana Trial Rule 65C, the plaintiff is ready and able to provide a security in the sum the court may deem proper for the payment of costs and damages to the defendant, should they be wrongfully enjoined or restrained. So if a court issues a temporary restraining order to stop the city from doing their project, they can turn around and say, as a plaintiff, this board's responsible for posting a bond in an amount sufficient to alleviate their damages, their financial damages of that injunction. So those are things we need to consider as a board if another motion like this is ever, or if this motion is even deemed to continue. So, talking about the private damages and maybe a private cause of action that the property owners have, the way the board could consider that is if we follow the statute correctly, where the municipality comes before the board first and requests permission to do this. The surveyor's office goes out and ascertains the cost of reconstructing or fixing the ditch so that it can handle that additional flow. They may also add in the damages to the affected land, so the property owners whose property is damaged by this additional flow can be added into that cost. And that's the surveyor's estimation of the cost of reconstruction. So that's something we may be looking at going forward. That's a way of making property owners whole, doing this appropriately and correctly through the statute. I can't say that the city, well, regardless of whether they were aware of the statute or not when they started the project, I don't think they were thinking there was going to be any dewatering or that there was going to be any additional flow to the Schurz ditch. Well, right now I think we have to acknowledge that there is, or there was, and there may potentially be ongoing in the future, at least with the release going into the wetlands. That could ultimately affect the Schurz ditch too, unless we have confirmation from your expert or your reliable party that that's not going to be an issue going forward. We did get an email from the county attorney Sunday evening. I don't know, I see it was addressed to Rich and Tony and myself. Did this get forwarded to the rest of the board members?
No, but I did talk to the county attorney before the meeting and saw him on the sidewalk, and he wanted the board to be aware of the actions that he presented in that email.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and read his email then. It says, Dear members of the board, as you know, on August 26, 2019, I wrote to city officials and requested that dewatering occurring at the city's storm sewer separation project along Boyd Boulevard that was flowing into the county-regulated Schurz ditch be halted until questions that county officials had could be answered. City Attorney Nick Otis wrote to me the next morning on August 27th to indicate that such dewatering would be stopped later in the day, and he also noted that, quote, in the future, if a project calls for dewatering that may affect a county drain, there will be a bid requirement that the contractor go before the County Drainage Board for approval, end quote. City Engineer Nick Minnick confirmed in his September 6th email that, quote, on Wednesday, August 28th, the contractor switched the temporary construction dewatering discharge from the low point adjacent to the LaPorte County Conservation Trust property to the constructed basin, end quote. He further noted that at that time, construction dewatering was no longer going into the Schurz ditch. As you know, Mr. Spear has been highly critical of me in various public forums for allegedly stopping your board from proceeding with an injunction request that you apparently passed on a unanimous vote at your last meeting. I understood the vote to mean that it was imperative to get work stopped on any dewatering into the regulated county drain until questions you and other county officials had could be answered. I made it very clear to Mr. Spear and anyone inquiring that the city and the county are partners in any number of projects, including Transit Triangle, property swap for parking, regional water and sewer district, and a multitude of worthy endeavors, where our first response, if there is a dispute, should not be to sue our partner, but to seek answers for them, which we did. The city has acknowledged that in the future, if any city project involves dewatering that might affect a county-regulated drain, approval by your board would be part of the bid requirements. In addition to my desire that we work out any differences with the city prior to filing litigation, my hesitancy also stems from knowledge of just how difficult injunctive relief is to get unless there is a clear and demonstrable showing of imminent, irreparable harm that can only be halted by a court's intervention. As you know, there is a weighing of the public interest in any court determination on a petition for injunction, along with the determination by the court of probability of success at trial. Injunction requests cannot be made lightly without an abundance of evidence available to the court. I would suggest that if, after reviewing the city attorney and city engineer's correspondence, your members have additional questions of the city, that you pose those directly to them. If you need the assistance of my office in securing further information or further assurances from the city, I will be happy to obtain those. However, if your questions are fully answered and if there is no evidence of the continued pumping or discharge of water from the site poses a threat to public health, safety, or welfare, or violates rules or regulations of the state or county, then I would respectfully request a motion to reconsider the injunction request is in order at your Tuesday meeting so that the public record can be made clear. Thank you for the consideration of the above. Any questions or?
I have no questions at this point.
Can I ask one question?
No, we're still in it. We're not to public comment yet, but
I just wanted to ask.
well, I agree with Shaw's assessment, obviously, and from the county standpoint, I understand it's a delicate issue. County, city working together. This board does have some autonomy in that, though. Okay, it's not that the county doesn't outrank or supersede. If the board decides to move forward, the board decides to move forward. That being said, you are an arm of the commissioner's office, or representative commissioner's not here this evening. This was his motion initially. If we go back to the statute that says the proper procedure that should have been followed from the beginning, had they come to you with a written request to do this, the board shall refer their request for consent to the county surveyor, who shall determine whether the regulated drain is adequate to handle the additional flow of water, if any, that would result from the construction, reconstruction, or maintenance proposed by the municipality. If the surveyor finds that the regulated drain is adequate to handle the additional flow of water, the surveyor shall make a written report of that fact to the board, which shall issue its order consenting to the construction, reconstruction, or maintenance by the municipality. So your action, or whether there is any action to be taken, unfortunately falls on Tony's shoulders to make that recommendation to you.
That's where I was getting to. How does this board move forward here? And that's what Christy and I were discussing. I haven't been out to that site in a week, so in the board's best interest, I believe the motion would be to suspend the injunction until we report back with our findings whether the pumps are actually turned off and the water is now flowing to the west and not to the shores, to the ditch that leads to the shores.
And as the attorney that would be representing that motion, if it were to go forward, I need that information anyhow. I can't go to court without that.
Well, I can just ask the city right here, right now. When I was there a month ago, there were 4 high-pressure lines pumping. It can be directly or indirectly into the Shores ditch. Are those high-pressure lines shut off?
Those have been removed as we move.
Nick, yeah, could you go to the microphone since this is on the record?
Those have been removed. The
points that you're talking about were part of the dewatering for the basin. There are well points that will go up Boyd Boulevard, and the dewatering for those well points over the past 4 days has been recharging the wetland to the north of the project.
Into your new retention pond?
Well, no, we stopped going into the retention pond. For the last 4 days, they've been inadvertently, as they came past the wetland to the north on the Arconic property, because the groundwater table dropped, the surface water in the wetland also dropped. So we coordinated through our wetland consultant to Army Corps. Army Corps said it would be reasonable to put that water back in. So we're putting that water back in, and then by the end of the day today, we had Boyd Boulevard closed today, and we ran a casing pipe across Boyd Boulevard, and all future dewatering is going to go directly into the combined sewer through that casing pipe. So by the end of the day today, for the last few, until I believe last Thursday, it was going into the basin. Then it's shifted to recharge the wetland, and now at the end of the day today, it'll all be going into the combined sewer. So we haven't stopped dewatering, because we need to in order to continue the project, but the dewatering water is no longer
It sounds
going
really
directly
good.
or
And
indirectly.
at the last meeting, you requested to put in a ground monitor at the beginning of that tile line. What's that monitor? What's the latest readings on that? Is that water going down?
It's been continually going down. I think Jerry said
Between 6 and 8 inches below.
6 to 8 inches below where it was when we started. Yeah, that
At the
your
all-time
last one.
high, basically. Is that sufficient to keep the wetland conservancy at their level, or is
I don't
this
know.
water dry? Guess that's farther north than this.
Yeah, I don't know at what point that pipe is actually exposed. Because you're at that point you're really lowering groundwater for a large area outside of just even the conservancy. So I don't know. That's a much larger
There's
question.
no control of that outlet, but an inlet pipe. But
Yeah.
the week I was out there a week ago, and you could see the grate that you stand on top of the outlet pipe now. So it has gone down demonstrably. That's kind of why I can't sit here and say I've seen it. I believe, Nick, that they are redirecting any dewatering for the pipes to the east, which would end up back in the Travis, not to the Shores. But that's up to the board.
So will you keep that pipe there then?
Yeah, so what there's a location there where we have a pipe crossing anyway. So what we did was we upsized that and put in a casing so that we could run dewatering water in the short term, and then when we were done dewatering for the project, we could reuse that pipe casing for the initial intent of the pipe. So.
My understanding that ain't far from the 18-inch. Inlet of the Shure. Do you propose any water coming out of this thing without a major storm heading to the?
No, that
Why would there be a need to pump again back into the Shures like you were before?
there wouldn't be any need to pump back into the Shures. The only reason it was going into Shures Ditch was for the temporary construction dewatering in order to lower the water table enough to construct the basin. There's a lot of different methods, and the contractor dewatering in our contract is incidental to other items. So the contractor is getting paid for excavation, they're getting paid for pipe, they're getting paid for a number of things. We don't design the dewatering for them. We don't. I mean, that's on them to figure out, and they felt it was necessary to dewater to construct the basin. Now that the basin is constructed, there's no need to do anything that would result in discharge to Shures
This
Ditch.
picture we got,
Yeah.
been, from my understanding, not too far from that 18-inch inlet.
It's on the opposite side of the conservation property, and what that is a control structure that has weirs in it. So it's like about a trying to remember how, it's a large structure. It has an 18-inch pipe coming in and has an 18-inch pipe going out, and then it has a weirs going up the middle of it, and the top weir would be set above the 100-year storm elevation for the basin. So the emergency outfall for the basin heads back north.
Okay.
But then those weirs could be removed if at some point in the future, and Conservation Trust would want to talk to the Drainage Board, I'm sure, but if they would find that they needed additional water, we could remove water from the basin in a rain event and send it to them if needed. If not needed, then all that structure does is really nothing. It's just there in case it's ever needed, but it's something to construct now instead of trying to come back and retrofit a basin to be able to do that in the future. So.
Okay. Any other questions from the city guy here? Thank you.
So just to wrap up attorney reports, I guess with all due respect to the county attorney's request, without Commissioner Mrzinski here who made the motion, I don't think withdrawing it is necessarily appropriate. I think Tony's advice is well stated, that maybe not tabling it, but holding it until you can get a formal report from his office as far as what the condition of the property is out there would be appropriate. Then we've got the option of having an executive session, since this would be pending litigation, prior to our next meeting if something needs to be done or addressed.
Otherwise, we can address it next meeting.
Which hopefully is, we've now got records that the water has dropped down, that there's no long-term impact of this, and now we're working with the city on a long-term plan to actually address an inadequate drain.
I think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I guess what Attorney Dancy's looking for is a motion to suspend, so he's not working on it until we get back.
Yeah, and I think we should wait until.
I think we should push, as part of the negotiations, that we do something with that tile line that's built in 1916. There's $40,000 there. We can spend some money to improve that line. It's overwhelmed in a good time, and that's in the city limits mostly. Some work needs to be done there. I mean, on a good faith between the county and the city, we should have some cooperation between Tony and the city about the existing tile line, what needs to be done.
Yeah,
A plan.
Without bringing it to the public, we are working on a plan, and it entails some property owners, so we don't want to divulge any discussions just yet.
Okay, you're working on it.
Oh, yes.
And the statute does take that into consideration, saying that the county surveyor can develop a plan and the city can bind itself by that to resolution. So ideally, that's what...
Cooperate.
Right.
No, we're looking for money.
I think at this point we can move the meeting to Tony's report.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, you want to make a motion to suspend this until either the report and some information, because you can always hold the meeting in a hurry, but the motion be to suspend until I or surveyor's office go look at it, see that the pumps are shut off and it's not flowing to the Schurz anymore, and the Schurz pipe is actually going down.
And that we're reinsured, they're not going to do it again.
Well, I think we're pretty assured that. I'll discuss that after. If the motion goes, I'll discuss that issue.
I'll make a motion, we table it until then.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, on that issue, this is a blessing in disguise, because this drainage board has some very old tiles across this county. Sorry, the drainage board has some very old tiles across this county, and this is kind of a local issue that I'm not sure. Maybe Jerry Jackson, Nick was probably not fully aware of what happens with this tile, I'm sure the consultants would not have been aware, but we get a lot of emails, Christy and Mike and I, asking for information, just kind of protect themselves, because there are situations in this county and all counties across Indiana where these old drainage tiles, these clay tiles, are not functioning, or they cannot perform to the level they need to with the flows we are putting down them. So it's good that the city has now made a declaration to ask, even if there's nothing, to ask, knowing that whether it's the normal flow or dewatering, where the ultimate outflows come, whether it's a 100-year rain, a 500-year rain, or a 1,000-year rain event. Marion County has that in their ordinance. Some counties have that. The county planning commission has looked at that as some sort of item, and it should include the county drainage board being asked. It should include MS4 being asked, whether your outflow, whether the downstream capacity can handle your outflow. Because we are now at the times, and I'm not sure, I believe this is truly something that wasn't done maliciously. They just, this is a Schurz ditch tile, an 18-inch tile, like Louis Spear said, that's 1916. It's not functioning at full capacity. Some things have happened. We've tried to clean it. We tried to maintain it. We tried to keep it functioning as best we can. And something that a project engineer would not be aware of, since they were not in the easement and they were flowing to an arm of the ditch, that they most likely would not have understood that this pipe could not handle the water point drainage of that magnitude. So this is kind of a blessing in disguise that at least the city, and maybe it's something we need to talk about with all municipalities, the little heads up that be careful. We have drainage tiles out there that are old, and they do not function to their capacity that they were put in, and they do not function for the capacity that we may want them to now and in the future. And so I can't divulge what we're working on just yet, because there are potentially landowners involved. We need to get something done for the Schurz ditch, but we have to be very careful. Just like all these old tiles, we have to be very careful that some of these tiles, if made bigger and larger and flow better and function better, we do not start draining wetlands, which are the most protected species in America, and we need to protect what we have. So that's why we're working on with the city. And I kind of said, we would like some funds, and maybe we could find some grants for some funds, because it only helps the city and it helps our drainage tiles work better and our drainage ditches work as well as they can in a very controlled environment. He said it best. We are looking at a controlled environment. This is not just pump as much water as we can downstream. We have to control the good times and the bad times. And final note on that is, I don't want the people to understand that we can design, or any engineer can design, for any storm that happens to us. 2008, like Elizabeth McCluskey said, was 11 inches. Can't design for that. We see it all over this country. We saw it in, Katrina. We saw it in the Mississippi and St. Louis. We can't design for everything. So if we and the engineers get ahead and put something on this tile, it's not a 1,000-year rain event. Some things will happen, and we hope we protect ourselves. And as I tell my students all the time, we have to fail safe. When it fails, we have to make sure it fails safe, because it will fail at some point in time. We just got to know who it's going to impact when it fails. We can't always control Mother Nature, even though we think we can, but we can surely guide her to make as less damage as we can. So that's my report on the Schurz ditch. Update on joint board reports is the Kankakee River Basin, the Kankakee Basin Commission. I think that's what they're calling it. Christy, Bill Crace, the Stark County Surveyor, Dan Gums, and Scott Pilaf all went down on the river, and we located and mapped all the trees that are leaning and dead from 104 to just south of State Road 8. It was a long day, but there are funds in place from this county and from the state of Indiana to make sure that we get these leaning trees and dead trees off of our banks of the Kankakee, as everything south of the summit flows into there, and the city knows this more than anybody. If we don't keep that working, we start getting flooded backwards, and if we don't work with Stark County and their Yellow River doesn't work as well, they start pushing backwards on us. So if we can get these trees in, we can start saving ourselves flooded ground. We can save ourselves money, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and these trees won't fall in the river. We got stopped 2 miles south of State Road 8 in the 10-mile road area. We couldn't, it was impassable. Stark County Surveyor got those out. with the money from the Kankakee Basin Commission and Scott Pilaf, but they also found another blockage another half a mile down that was even worse than the one we ran into. So that just affects all of us upstream, including the Travis and the Shores and the Little Kankakee and anything up in St. Joe County. So that's our joint board report that the Kankakee Basin Commission is looking at funds. We are going to work on an application for our county in 2 areas. The area at 10 Mile Road south of 8 and the adjacent area north of there. And then we're going to look at an area around State Road 6. We got the worst leaners and dead trees in there that we can to make sure they're not going to fall in. And we're looking at putting, not just taking trees out, but in the future, looking at a good standard cross section so we can put some native trees in there, some native grasses in there, get some grounds for our natural wildlife. But at this point, we're going to make sure we aren't causing blockages on the Kankakee and the Yellow with Stark County to make sure we can function as well as we can right now so we can move forward with the next step in the plan to look at some remediation on the Kankakee and the Yellow, whether it be some storage that we buy, some storage that people give us, some water quality issues. It's a very proactive board, and we're going to push real hard, as you've seen I've done in my career here. We are going to make sure that LaPorte County, the Drainage Board used to always say first is best. We're going to try to put our proposal up there first and try to get as much money as we can of these funds and get our river working as well as we can upstream. That's all I have. Any questions?
Any other questions for Tony? I think we've paused enough. Old business? Anybody got old business to bring up?
They put 2 bids out today for County Line Ditch and the Ridge Run Ditch that we motioned to allow me to do earlier this summer, and I sent those out today to come back for October. So just so everybody knows that's out. Come back in October, and then they'll get to that after the harvest.
Any new business?
And an emergency beaver dam situation came up on the property of Henry Mania north of 150 North last week. So we deployed a trapper from St. Joe County. His name is Mike Keplin. He did the work on Hudson Lake Outlet. So he's trapping out of season. So any fees incurred will come out of the County Line Ditch Fund. But we have him out there now on Mania's property, hopefully taking care of that because he had water backed up into his field.
Do you have a plan B if the trap doesn't get it out of there quick enough?
I am fully confident he will be able to relocate the little furry guys.
All right. Claims?
I had 2 claims come in just right before we walked over for the meeting from Joe Zolvinsky from J&J Excavating. So he was able to finish the Byers property bull ditch project for brush and dead tree removal from 925 North to Bob Byers' fence. His total was $3,850. That was the agreed upon amount from the spring, and he just now got to getting it done, and I haven't heard any complaints, and he just brought me this bill like 15 minutes before we came over here. And on the same bull ditch, he also finished digging completed on the west arm of the bull ditch. He had a balance due of $950 on that. So that is going to come out of bull ditch money. If there's not enough in there, which I didn't have time to check, it will come out of the general drain improvement fund, and then we'll get paid back through bull ditch assessment.
So if we were to ask you if this is finished to the specs and it's good enough to pass the claims, have you looked at it and viewed these projects that they're...
He just brought me these like 10 minutes before we walked over here, so I had no knowledge that he was working on it. But you can make the motion to approve his claims based on our field inspection.
Anybody want to make that motion?
Subject to the field inspection.
Yes, subject to.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, and according to that.
A second for that?
Please.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Joint board reports.
I was at a soil and water meeting the other night, and they were talking about funds for cover crops and stream bank restoration, and they didn't know offhand where the money came from. I got to look, and it's coming from the Kankakee Basin Commission, a large amount of them. 50% of the money is coming from the Kankakee. For cover crops, I think that's an overreach. I'd like to keep the money to the river.
We will forward that to the board, as I'm not a voting member, but we will forward that.
It raises a concern because some of those cover crops aren't even in the Kankakee River Basin.
Duly noted. I agree.
Anything else on that?
They were talking about the K1 drain. The work's been completed on that. Bottom line, you can read the report, 13 pages, but there's no source of E. coli pollution that they can pinpoint. It's normal.
Good.
Some golf course stuff a little bit, but
It's good to hear. That's been the report we've been waiting to hear for a long time, I think.
Yes.
Sounds good. Any other joint board reports? You already gave yours, right, Tony?
Yep. Kankakee Basin Commission.
MS4 reports?
Mr. President, I understand there may be members of the audience that want to address the lake drain operation, and I would ask that they be granted permission to address me at this time.
And then you'll go afterwards, or?
We'll see how long it takes to get through this.
For the Hudson Lake issue.
Can you step to the podium and state your name and address, please?
Yeah, we've made it to the public comment portion of the meeting now.
You guys need to speak up. Older people like us can't hear back there, especially when people have hearing aids. We got an issue at the Hudson Lake, a major one.
Could you state your name, sir? Could you state your name?
Ed Weedle.
Thank you.
Okay. Why are you draining the lake? Is the number one thing. It's so low in a little Hudson Lake. I got photographs of that. And back in 16, the board even said the lake is low. And yet you guys keep on draining it. It don't make sense. Right now, where my dock is, I got 80 feet of dock out, and I got photographs of it and everything, where it's only 2 inches of water. And just back in the spring and the summer, I could move my dock, my boat all the way up, 60 feet up. That's how low the water is now. And you always come up with an excuse for the sewer problem. Well, we had that tested. There's no problem with the sewer. And then they come up with the excuse of using it for the road, for the emergency. Well, the road is fine. And the road that they're talking about is along the edge of the lake by the beach area. There's nothing wrong with that over there because a fire truck ain't going to go down there anyway. You got the main road up above with the houses. So why do you worry that? And then they come up with the excuse of beavers and everything.
I'll go ahead and address that because by they, it's me. This is my operation. I'm in charge of it, and I've made all the decisions. This road was damaged by ice and underwater for the last year. We have had flooding for the last year and extremely high lake levels due to beavers and beaver dams. And the last meeting, I stated that I was going to drain 6 inches more off of the lake than what I usually did until the conditions that I had set forth have been met. Those conditions have not been met. I did close the drain.
Well,
So we're going to stop doing
so
it.
they got a problem with the drain system.
We have seaweed and other things that get caught in the gate that allows a little bit of water to escape, but for the most part it is closed. It's not draining anything sufficiently. I would like to also point out that we are still above the legal limit. We are above the legal limit. We cannot drain lower than the legal limit because it will automatically stop, because that's the level that the weir is set at.
Okay, then if you're gonna go by that route and everything, when are you gonna do something about the other lake where it's so low?
Okay, I can address that. I'm not going to do anything about that because my job is to operate the drain. Now, the people on your side have gotten used to the water level being high, extremely high, and flooded for the last year, which is convenient for you. It's not convenient for people on the other side who can't flush their toilets and their septics are underwater. Now, I have to balance public safety with recreational use. And I'm going to tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to allow this drain to be operated to whether or not people can get their boats out. Okay, the problem over there is that there has been sediment buildup over the years and years that needs to be dredged out. It needs to be dredged out.
Okay, then why don't the DNR or people come out there to look at it, to give us the permission? We can't even get into.
Well, I will tell you what, if I would be supportive of that, and I will help you address the DNR regarding that in any way that I can.
It's not just me, there's a lot of other people all the way around, even on the lake itself. They got the problem where it's too low.
I agree. That needs to be dredged out, and that sediment needs to be addressed. I mean, we had a recent project where we took 5 to 7 feet of sediment out of Fish Lake, and I don't know if that's ever been done at Hudson Lake, at least in that area. But I don't want to have the drain operation. We're not going to use the drain to accommodate for the buildup of sediment. The drain is for.
This year's been this low is about 19 years ago. Besides the time when they drained it all the way to order to walk across the channel. And you probably remember that. There's Bill Jones, he knows more about it.
How I'm looking at it is we have finally got it under control where I can get to the infrastructure without going underwater and clearing debris out of the drain, and Lakeshore Drive is now open again. That's how I'm looking at it. And I do understand, he's right over where he's at. It is only 2 inches. And it's, they put their piers out in the spring early, and the water was way up. And so I've been draining it. And like I said, I'm going to drain 6 inches more than what I normally do. And I have done that. And the water receded, and then their piers are way back, and they are having difficulty getting their boats out.
I got 80 feet of pier out, and for me to get out even to the channel, I have to put about 300 feet of pier out. But that don't make sense. When you got a lake, when you should be taking care of the lake, you take the money from the county to use it on a big lake, but you won't put a damn dime into the lower lake.
Here's the thing. We only collect a few $100s a year for Hudson Lake, and we send that money to St. Joe County.
Okay, why did they put a damn boat dock in over there, in that section, when you can't use it?
I don't know why that happened, but that wasn't this board or this department.
Where did they get the money for that?
I can't speak to that. We didn't. That was not our jurisdiction or authority. That did not come from us.
It needs to be a major issue.
Well, I can tell you that the drain is closed. Okay, the drain is closed for now. Any water that is escaping is very minimal, and it's because there might be stuff trapped in the gate. I can take another look at it, but we've just recently got to the part where I can even just get to manage our infrastructure. So people have enjoyed the higher lake level for the last year, and when I say enjoyed, I mean on their side, not on the side that's flooded where they can't flush their toilets and their septics are under. They haven't enjoyed it. But to repeat the conditions that I set forth in the last meeting, when we have the ditch clear cut of the trees and stuff falling in that's blocking that water, that backs it up and has just created so much of a problem for the last year. And I can go a season without beavers, I'll consider putting it back 9 to 12 above. But your side needs to be dredged, and I'm not going to use the drain operation for recreational as opposed to public health and safety.
Well, we need to, at least you guys need to help issue to address. You have them come out.
I will back you up with DNR on the dredging. I'm willing to do that.
They won't even come out and look. But nobody down there in that part of the lake now. You talk to them, they blow you off.
Well, I'll tell you, I can't make them do it, but I'll send out an
I
email.
ain't never seen you out there to look at it either.
I'm out there all the time, believe
Well,
me.
they've been issued a couple of times to close it down something that because it's too low, and you won't even come out and look at this area. You know, at least have the courtesy to come out and look and see just how bad it is. And all you do is just, I didn't realize how low it was. Well, you can.
I'm very aware of the lake level at all times. If you put your address on there, I'll be more than happy to come out there and check it out.
Hudson Point, right on the lane.
All right, so have I sufficiently addressed your concerns and questions, sir?
Pardon?
Have I sufficiently addressed all of your questions and concerns?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, and I'll come out and take a look.
And I can show you pictures of it. If you want to have them.
Sure.
Some information for the board. I'm real happy with the work Mike does, and we agree with him and support him on the Hudson Lake because we know what happened this spring. It was a really horrible, wet spring, and we are just starting to get in the rainy season now. So maybe they'll start enjoying it because the other side won't enjoy it. Because if this fall is like the spring, there's nothing Mike can do to open that thing large enough to get that water to drain out. So he's trying to bide us some time after what we went through in the spring. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. I don't know if there was anyone else that came to speak or if I've sufficiently addressed the questions or if you have something that I haven't addressed. Anyone? Oh yeah, that concludes my reports, Mr. President.
All right, any other public comment?
Can I just throw this in real quick? I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. Mike spends every single day of his life trying to maintain the he does a really good job. He does the best job he can. I think we need to thank him for his effort because he really tries to do a good job and he thinks that happy to be out there.
And
I've
been out there with him many a times, and we watch the water flow all the time out there. So he does a great job.
Yeah, I know he's got a tough one there. And you got to take care of the people on both sides, but the safety of the people in their flushing their toilets is number one.
Thank you.
To adjourn.
We don't need a motion. We're going to limit you to 5 minutes because these guys want to get to the field.
Well, they're going to have to wait 2 hours. One thing, first of all, Tony, in any of your reports, you fail to ever mention the land use changes out there and how that has affected. You know, when you have law that to reconstruct a drain necessitated by changes in land use in the assessments, that has all changed. You don't address that at all. You make it sound like this is really going to help solve the city's problem. The city created a problem when they separated the storm sewers up in the north of the Cherry Cable Drain. They put it in a pond there with no outlet, and I'll go back to history again. The guy that helped design that whole project was a guy by the name of CJ. I worked with him out of Bethlehem Steel in 1963 because he asked me where I was from, LaPorte, and you know, went on and he said, I'm over on the east side. And he said, you anywhere near the Sure's Ditch? And I said, yeah, goes right through our farm. And he said, we're designing that carry cable separation, and that water is going to go through the Schurz ditch, go along the tracks, under the tracks, and the drain will be improved. And it was like a wow, this is, for once, something is being done right. They have not finished that project. The only thing they did is just like when you're saying, if you're harmed, the only thing they did was the water flows into the basements around that basin south of the tracks. They bought the houses and tore the houses down because they're not inhabitable. Why in the hell didn't they just finish their project and put it in the Schurz ditch the way it should be done? This is history. And you'll never ever address that. The land use has changed. And it needs to be addressed. And it should have been addressed right in this meeting. But we're going to start from the beginning. The first part of this is quite a bit of history that we're not even going to get into, but I gave it to, just for informational purposes, because people ask me, well, that isn't even a legal drain when we first started. It's all right here in the first pages. And it's like all of the things that have happened through the years. In September 27th, 1973, there was a petition to have the Schurz ditch, to have it reconstructed. And this was after the state highway altered the whole drainage system on the north end of town there, where they brought water in from Vale Road, and then from the tracks all came to the headwater, the start of the Schurz ditch. This went bye-bye just like everything else. Nothing done. Commissioners, oh, well, you don't need that, and nothing's done. But this is the good old boy way of doing things. Do nothing. And here's something that in 81, this was maybe on the wrong side here, but in 1981, your dad, this was when the tile was blocked. The first time they paid Kasanovich and South Bend to clean that tile and put the manholes in. Well, they never jetted the tile. And by not jetting the tile, I had to go to the Drainage Board meeting 6 months straight, maybe 8 months before. But in the interim, your dad hired a guy professor from Valpo University to come out there and check the flow. He did. Well, he comes up with 3.33 cubic feet per second, when in fact, that's only a third. Well, after 6 months, I finally talked to Dick Knoll, one of the commissioners, and I said, Dick, we have a major problem out there. That tile is still plugged. They never cleaned the tile. And I said, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to block the tile. You come out to the first manhole, at 500 feet. And I had the tile blocked at 55 with a sheet of plywood. And I crawled down in there, and he was there within 10 or 15 minutes. And I had already been standing on my head, got in there with a light, and I had a hoe. I reached down there with a hoe. You couldn't turn the hoe. The hoe is about this wide. You couldn't turn the hoe this way. It's full of gravel. They reached in as far as they could reach when they put the manholes in. And they paid $33,000 to get that cleaning done.
We're at 6 minutes. We're at 6 minutes.
Okay, well, it ended up, then the county paid for it again. The same way of doing things. And for you to even imply that tile is not running at capacity, you're wrong. But the land use changes is why it's backed up. The city's dumping water and not following the law and coming here and asking to connect to the drain and showing all the plans and specs They went ahead and did it. And drowned us again. But you still have never even talked to them about the land use changes. But the second one here was, this goes back to in 1980. This is a map that shows the Schurz ditch and all of the 4,000 feet of Bernanke ditches that connected to the Schurz ditch at Station 55. And what it says, these are my words, solid line signifies open ditches that to my knowledge have never been authorized to drain into the Schurz ditch. You have 4,000 feet of open drain, open ditches to a drain, it's not going to. The whole drain is only 10,000 feet, and they illegally entered 4,000 feet. But then it ended up, we have a petition for a judicial review, and that after we filed for the judicial review, the Drainage Board finally cleaned up their act a little bit, removed the pumps, and got the tile jutted, and had it running, and made the necessary repairs. But this is, when you're talking about today and what can be done. Well, what wasn't done in 1981 when this order went out to Bernard Yellen, Arden Dunlap, and Bernanke's, it was further noticed that the ditch bank had been removed from the bend just north of the pump installation to a point further north, allowing soil to enter the ditch, causing a blockage in the ditch. The bank must be replaced and soil removed from the ditch. If that had been done, the ditch would be intact, on its original line and grade, and that the two ditches that Bernanke built illegally, they would have been blocked because that west bank would have, blocked when he replaced it. So that's where that is. That could be done today in the way of.
You're at 10 minutes now.
Well, let me know in an hour.
Well,
okay, right here.
We got other people we want to hear.
Oh, I know, but I mean this right here. This is my last hurrah, John, because it's senseless to come back here.
Well, give us a point of what you want us to do.
Okay. Well, what I'm doing right here, when you people, the next sheet, you go back to when all of this was prior converted land. In 1958, this aerial shows every bit of the Spear Farm, every bit of the Helmet property, every bit of the Conservancy Trust, every bit of that was farmed on this aerial. And on the north side, there's no ditch.
We can't go back to 1958.
I'm giving you a
history lesson.
Right, history lesson. But you're sitting here last week or last month and saying, well, they don't know where that water goes. In the 1965 aerial, it shows the ditches that Bernanke dug, just like I told you, but nobody will believe it. But it doesn't, they don't know where it goes. The next one is 1972. But by the time you get to 1972, you have deterioration from up on the north end from all of the water that's being dumped, by the state highway on Keith Orcott's ground. He lost 10 acres there that he couldn't farm right in 1961 because they had a 24-inch pipe discharging off of the state highway.
Louis, I've lost 10 acres of corn I haven't harvested just listening to you in these last 10 minutes. I gotta go.
Well, I'm going to take my time because, some of these things have to be addressed.
Louis, what we can do today, the pumps will be shut down and any further dewatering will go into the CSO and not into the Sure's ditch. Will you take that as a win for yourself? Some of that you were in
How do you take it as a win when they told you weeks ago that it was shut down? They're dumping in the basin and it's running right out of the basin. And if Virginia, you said you were out there with water running out of the basin on that pipe?
Labor Day it was, but I haven't been back there since.
Okay, so I've been back there and it still is.
How about if I assure you, my word to you, that the pumps are going to be shut down and any future pumping will go into the combined sewer. That's what we can do for you today. Is that where you?
Well, I just have some other things that have to do with, nobody follows the law. Okay, you have the water well drillers and water well pump installers. Every well that's abandoned has to be plugged. They punched 40-foot deep dewatering wells and never plugged when they removed those casings.
I believe they were plugged with bentonite as standard procedure.
When they pulled the casings.
As far as I know.
I sure as hell didn't see it out there, because I was out there. But those right there, if they're not plugged, any pollution will get into the groundwater. They obviously don't care because they were purging their wells up there on the north end at the rate of 2.5 million gallons a day because they're contaminated. Well, now it's shut off, but this all harms.
I think that there was some miscommunication and the contractor didn't know that they were going to dewater, but I think this board backed you up last month when they made the motion for the stop work order. I think that they further backed you up today by getting the city to agree to stop the pumps today. Like when we leave by the end of the day today, and stop it, and any further dewatering will go away from your property, into the CSO. And we're doing that for you today, right now.
But you're going to allow that 60-inch pipe to discharge into that basin. The same thing that's going to happen, they say that once it goes into the basin, you will not be harmed because it goes down in the groundwater. Their dewatering drained a 5-acre lake, took 36 inches of water off of it. How does it, if you put water into the basin 8 feet, 9 feet deep above, the existing water, if they can drain a pond with dewatering over a period of 3 weeks, that water going into the basin is going to go right into the Sure's ditch. But you say that's fine. All of this water has never been assessed to go into the Sure's ditch.
We're not saying that's fine. What we're being told is that's actually going to lessen the amount of water that's going to go into the Sure's ditch. And what we've got for the near term for right now is any further dewatering is going to go into the sewer, not into the Sure's ditch.
And if Tony's office goes out and determines that water is going into the Sure's ditch, you can be assured that this board's going to take action on that. But just you saying that right now doesn't make it so, just like them saying it doesn't happen. The fact finder for this board is the county surveyor.
When they start discharging water through that 60-inch pipe into the basin, you're going to allow it to be built with no permission, no nothing for anyone. Nobody has a word to say about anything. That it should be stopped until all of it's done properly.
The pumping is going to be stopped and any future activity will have oversight from our office.
Well, and why isn't
I'm working with you here. Throw me a bone, Louis. We're wrapping it up. You win today. The pumps are shut down. We're no more dewatering into the Sure's ditch.
But getting back to the Cherry Cable drain, Is this what you're saying? This is what you're saying, that you're going to be harmed and then they're going to take your land and throw you a bone?
Well, they bought your land.
Pardon?
They bought your land.
The rest of it.
They're going to buy the rest of it. I guess the board wants to know, what do you want? Do you want the hole filled in? Do you want the pipe shut down? Do you want the Bernanke arm cut off? What do you want?
That project stopped.
You want it filled back in and shut it all
Stop the
down?
project until if they fix the pipe on the south like they should have done, it would probably work.
Right.
Where on the
We'll work
south?
on it. We'll fix the pipe on the south.
But to them dump more water on us, and just like they've done in the past, they've okayed every one of those industrial sites. They gave the okay for Walmart to dump their water on us. It's with their permission.
That's what I was kind of wanting to do. Cut to the chase. You want the pipe, Sure's ditch pipe outlet fixed.
I want that fixed, and also this water stopped until that is done.
That's what the board has told them to do. We will do that.
Are you going to shut the project down?
We're going to see that they shut the water off, so they said to shut the water off. So we're going to make sure they shut the water off. If they shut the water off, then there's no water going to the Sure's ditch anymore. And then we don't need to shut the project down.
But they have nothing, they don't have to follow any Indiana drainage laws.
What drainage law is there? They're not putting any into the arm of the cable. They're not putting any into the Bernanke arm into the Sure's ditch anymore. Right? Right? If they're not putting any water in the Bernanke arm of the Sure's, then we have no more jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction is the public drain.
And that's what the board has asked you to determine. So,
We can do that.
My concern is that we're going to need some water to keep the Conservancy District happy.
I'm not going to let the Conservancy dry.
Well, I'm thinking that's our concern right now.
Not drying up the Conservancy District.
Are we, what you're saying then is the bottom of that pipe is not of question?
We're going to make sure there's no water coming out of that pipe they put to the Conservancy District, and it's going to the west and not in the Travis outlet and not to the Sure's.
Well, I'm saying at station 55 down there, I want to see the bottom of that pipe. By law, we are entitled to that. The legal flow line of that ditch is the bottom of that pipe.
which pipe are you talking about? Not the newly constructed pipe.
I don't want to answer, Louie, because that means we're drying up the Conservancy District completely dry.
Well, I don't want to.
That's what that would do.
Why don't you replace the bank of the ditch? That was ordered back in 1980. Then whatever they do on that side, they can do.
Yeah, we will look at that for you.
But I'm not accepting anything less than to see the bottom of that tile. And this water that's being dumped from the north, it's going to be addressed.
All right, we will discuss that with the Conservancy District, that you want to dry up that wetland completely dry.
Why don't you replace the west bank of the ditch, and then it won't go dry.
We'll discuss that with them too. This is a tough situation, but right now they're not pumping any water in there.
Do you know what prior converted is?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. So your farm was prior converted, and you want to keep it dry. So your farm dried up a lake, and you want to keep it that way, even though it was a lake before it was a farm.
It was 1916.
So I guess the shoe's on the other foot, I guess, because it's good for the goose, but not good for the gander. If you dry up a lake and farm it, then you don't want it to dry. You don't want it to be wet again, right?
Well, that was done by the court.
All right.
This is why I've said, for 40 years between you and your dad, the mealy mouth.
Let's keep it from getting personal.
If you cannot follow the law, then you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be there.
Rick Brown, LaPorte County, MS4.
Try and hit that microphone really good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just want to let you know real fast, on a lighter note, while there's a little oxygen left in the room, that basically MS4 has added to our, we have a page that when contractors come in with new projects, stormwater-wise and stuff, there's various comments and stuff they have to fill out for MS4. After consulting with the county surveyor, my board president, we have added in the comment section, if there is any outfall within 2,000 feet of a legal drain, that they need to inform MS4 so I can inform my board president and or Mr. Hendricks. And it's just another little bit of a check area so we can have more information from contractors that are out of county, out of state, et cetera, et cetera. Just wanted to let you know we've added that to our form.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Any other public comment? Hearing none, we're adjourned.